Standing in my childhood bedroom, boxes scattered around me, I never imagined that asking one simple question would destroy my family forever. Why does Melissa get a brand new BMW while I have to take the bus to community college? That single sentence exposed a web of lies, favoritism, and financial fraud that had been festering in our house for years. My father's face turned crimson as he screamed those words that still echo in my mind. "Pack your bags, Savannah. You're done disrespecting this family." But before we dive into this family revenge story, tell me where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt like the black sheep, and subscribe because this story has twists that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happened when the truth finally came out. My name is Savannah Torres, and for 18 years, I lived in the shadow of my younger sister, Melissa. Our house in suburban Phoenix felt like a shrine to her achievements. Cheerleading trophies, honor roll certificates, and photos of her perfect smile lined every hallway. Meanwhile, my academic achievements and part-time job at the local bookstore barely earned a nod from our parents, David and Carmen Torres. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was getting ready for my shift at Barnes& Noble, counting the crumpled bills in my wallet to see if I could afford lunch. Through my bedroom window, I watched Melissa posing next to her brand new silver BMW, taking selfies for her Instagram story. The car had appeared in our driveway 3 days earlier, complete with a giant red bow that Dad had insisted on for the photos. "It's her reward for maintaining a 4.0 GPA, Mom had explained when I asked about it over dinner. You know how hard she works." I bit my tongue, remembering my own 3.8 GPA that apparently didn't warrant so much as a congratulations. While Melissa attended private school with tuition that cost more than most people's annual salary, I had been enrolled in the local public high school because it builds character, according to Dad. That Tuesday morning, something inside me finally snapped. Maybe it was watching her complain about the BMW's color not matching her aesthetic, or maybe it was the stack of community college pamphlets on my desk that I'd been forced to collect myself while Dad hired a private college counselor for Melissa. Either way, I marched downstairs to where Dad was reading his newspaper, coffee steaming beside him. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He barely looked up from the financial section. "Make it quick, Savannah. I have a conference call in 10 minutes. Why does Melissa get a brand new BMW while I have to take the bus to community college?" The newspaper crumpled in his hands. His coffee cup rattled against the saucer as he set it down with force that made me flinch. When he finally looked at me, his eyes held a cold fury I had never seen before. "Excuse me. I just want to understand." I continued, my heart pounding, but my resolve strengthening. "She gets designer clothes, private tutoring, a car, private school, and you're paying for her to apply to 15 different universities. I asked for help with a single community college application fee, and you told me to get a job." Dad stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped against the kitchen tiles with a sound that made my teeth ache. "How dare you question the decisions I make for this family?" "I'm not questioning your decisions. I'm asking why those decisions always benefit Melissa and never me." "Because Melissa doesn't stand in my kitchen demanding explanations like some entitled brat." His voice had risen to a shout that brought Mom running from the laundry room. "What's going on?" Mom asked, her eyes darting between us nervously. "Your daughter thinks she deserves the same treatment as Melissa." Dad spat, his face reddening with each word. "She apparently doesn't understand that respect and gratitude are earned, not given." I felt tears stinging my eyes, but I refused to back down. "I've worked part-time since I was 16. I've never been in trouble, never missed curfew, never failed a class. What exactly do I need to do to earn the same consideration you automatically give Melissa?" "You need to learn your place in this family," Dad said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And since you clearly haven't figured that out after 18 years, maybe it's time you learned it somewhere else." The kitchen fell silent, except for the humming of the refrigerator. Mom's face had gone pale, but she said nothing. Through the window, I could see Melissa still taking photos with her car, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside. "What are you saying?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "I'm saying, pack your bags, Savannah. You're done disrespecting this family. If you think you're adult enough to question my authority, then you're adult enough to figure out life on your own." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Dad, I wasn't disrespecting you. I was just asking a question. A question that implied I'm unfair to my own children. A question that suggested I don't know how to run my own household." He moved closer, and I could smell the coffee on his breath. "Let me make something crystal clear. Everything Melissa has, she has earned through excellence. Everything you don't have, you haven't earned through mediocrity." Mediocrity? The word came out as a whisper. "I've worked harder than she has for everything I've gotten." "Have you?" Because last I checked, Melissa wasn't standing in my kitchen making demands and disrespecting her father. Mom finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. "David, maybe we should all calm down and discuss this rationally." "There's nothing to discuss, Carmen. Savannah has made her position clear. She thinks she knows better than the people who have fed, clothed, and housed her for 18 years. I looked at Mom, desperate for support, for someone to point out the insanity of what was happening, but she just stared at the floor, her hands twisting in her apron. "You have until tonight to pack whatever you can fit in your car," Dad continued, "and don't even think about coming back until you've learned some respect and gratitude." "I don't have a car," I said numbly. "Then I guess you'll have to figure that out too." As I stood there in the kitchen, where I'd eaten thousands of meals, where Mom had helped me with homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, I realized that asking one simple question had cost me everything I thought I could count on. The worst part wasn't the punishment. It was the realization that this level of rage had been simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for any excuse to explode. That afternoon, while Dad was locked in his home office on his conference call, and Mom had mysteriously disappeared to run errands, I sat in my room staring at the boxes I was supposed to fill. 18 years of life reduced to whatever could fit in a couple of cardboard containers. The injustice of it burned in my chest, but beneath the hurt and anger, something else was growing. Curiosity. Why had my question triggered such an extreme reaction? Dad's fury seemed disproportionate, almost panicked, like I had stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. I walked down the hallway to Melissa's room, knowing she was at cheerleading practice until 6. Her door was always locked, another privilege I'd never been granted, but I knew she kept a spare key taped under her desk from all the times I'd seen her retrieve it when she'd locked herself out. Her room looked like a Pinterest board come to life. Everything coordinated perfectly, from the rose gold laptop sitting open on her white desk to the designer handbags arranged artfully on floating shelves. But it wasn't the aesthetics that caught my attention. It was the stack of papers next to her laptop. College acceptance letters. Not just one or two, but a dozen thick envelopes from schools I'd only dreamed of attending. Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton. Each one offering not just acceptance, but full scholarships. My hands shook as I read through them. How was this possible? Melissa was smart, sure, but full rides to Ivy League schools required more than just good grades. Underneath the acceptance letters was something that made my blood run cold. A folder labeled "Financial Aid Applications" in Mom's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers and found documents I never knew existed. Tax returns showing our family income as barely above the poverty line. Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of showing minimal balances. Official forms declaring Dad unemployed for the past 3 years. None of it made sense. Dad worked as a financial advisor for a major firm downtown. He'd been there since before I was born. We lived in a house worth over $800,000 in one of Phoenix's most expensive neighborhoods. Melissa's private school tuition alone was $40,000 a year. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. Then I heard the garage door opening. Mom was back early. I quickly returned everything to exactly where I'd found it locked. Melissa's door, and raced back to my room. But I couldn't focus on packing. Instead, I sat on my bed staring at the photos on my phone, trying to piece together what I was seeing. Financial aid fraud was a federal crime. If these documents were fake, and Dad was intentionally misrepresenting our family's financial situation to secure scholarships for Melissa, this was way bigger than simple favoritism. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jake. "Heard about the family drama. You okay?" I realized news traveled fast in our neighborhood. Probably half the block had heard Dad yelling at me through our thin kitchen window. "Can you come over? I need to show you something," I typed back. 20 minutes later, Jake was sitting on my bedroom floor while I showed him the photos. His eyes grew wider with each image. "Savannah, this is insane," he whispered, even though we were alone in the house. "Your dad makes like 200 grand a year, right? These papers say he's been unemployed since you were 15. That's exactly what I'm thinking, but how is it possible he goes to work every day? We see his paychecks." Jake was quiet for a moment, scrolling through the photos again. "Wait, look at this bank statement. See this account number? It's different from all the others. And look at the routing number." I peered closer at the screen. "What about it?" "My mom works at Desert Financial Credit Union. That's their routing number, but look at this other statement. Same bank, but completely different account numbers and balances." The realization hit me like a truck. Multiple accounts. He's been maintaining fake accounts with minimal balances to show for financial aid applications while keeping the real family money in different accounts. "Not just different accounts," Jake said, his voice grim. "Look at the names on these statements. Some of them say David Torres, but this one says D. Ramirez and this one says David T. Rodriguez." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. He's been using fake identities. It looks like it. And if I'm right, this isn't just about college scholarships for Melissa. This is identity fraud, tax fraud, financial aid fraud. This is like a whole criminal enterprise. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what we'd discovered settling over us. My father wasn't just playing favorites. He was running some kind of elaborate financial scam, and Melissa was either completely innocent or his willing accomplice. "There's more," I said, remembering something that had bothered me earlier. "Why was Melissa's room locked? She's never locked it before, especially not during the day when she's at school." Jake looked at me with raised eyebrows. "You think there's more evidence in there?" "I think if Dad is running cons and if Melissa is benefiting from them, she might know more than she's letting on. Or," Jake said carefully, "she might be completely in the dark, and your parents are protecting her from finding out what they're doing." I thought about this. Sweet, perfect Melissa, who'd never had to work for anything in her life, who believed she'd earned every scholarship and opportunity through her own merit. If she found out that her entire future was built on fraud, it would destroy her. But then I remembered her smug smile when she'd gotten the BMW, her casual dismissal whenever I'd mentioned struggling to afford basic things, her complete lack of awareness about our family's supposed financial struggles despite supposedly qualifying for need-based aid. "No," I said finally. "She knows. Maybe not the details, but she knows something isn't right. You don't get handed a luxury car and Ivy League scholarships while your sister gets kicked out for asking questions unless you know exactly what game is being played." Jake nodded slowly. "So what are you going to do?" I looked around my childhood bedroom at the boxes I was supposed to pack my life into, at the photos on my phone that proved my father was a criminal. For the first time since that morning, I smiled. I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes, and then I'm going to make sure everyone pays for what they've done. The next morning, I woke up in Jake's guest room with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. His parents had immediately offered me a place to stay when Jake explained the situation, though I'd kept the fraud evidence to myself for now. I needed to be absolutely certain before I made accusations that could send my father to prison. My first stop was the Phoenix Public Library, where I could use their computers and internet access to research without leaving a digital trail on my own devices. What I discovered over the next 6 hours made my stomach turn. David Torres, financial advisor at Morrison & Associates, had indeed been employed there for over 20 years. But the David Torres whose tax returns claimed unemployment for the past 3 years had a Social Security number that was 1 digit different from my father's real number. The David T. Rodriguez, whose bank statements showed poverty-level income, lived at an address that didn't exist. And D. Ramirez, who'd been claiming unemployment benefits for 5 years, was supposedly living in a homeless shelter in downtown Phoenix. My father hadn't just committed financial aid fraud. He'd created an entire network of false identities to work the system from multiple angles. The unemployment benefits alone probably netted him thousands of dollars each month, money that was intended for people who actually needed help. But the real shock came when I started looking into Melissa's scholarships more closely. The full ride to Harvard wasn't just need-based aid. It was a special program specifically designed for students from families affected by long-term unemployment and financial hardship. She'd written essays about our family's struggles, about watching our father lose his job and sink into depression, about how financial stress had torn our family apart. Reading her scholarship essays felt like being punched in the gut repeatedly. She'd painted herself as a resilient survivor who'd overcome poverty and family trauma to achieve academic excellence. She'd described watching me struggle to afford basic necessities while she worked multiple jobs to help support our family. According to her essays, she'd been secretly working part-time and giving her earnings to our parents to help pay bills. None of it was true. While I'd been actually working part-time and struggling to save money for college, she'd been fabricating a sob story that had convinced admissions committees at the most prestigious universities in the country to not only accept her, but pay for her entire education. I printed everything and stuffed it into a folder, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was deliberate, calculated fraud that had stolen opportunities from students who actually deserved need-based aid. My phone rang as I was leaving the library. Mom's number. "Savannah, honey, please come home. Your father's calmed down and we can work this out." Has he, Mom? Has he really calmed down, or is he just worried about what I might have figured out? Silence on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, more frightened. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do. I think you know exactly what I mean. Savannah, please, just come home. We can talk about this as a family. Like we talked about it yesterday when Dad kicked me out for asking why Melissa gets treated differently." Another long pause. "Your sister doesn't know anything about the complications with our finances. She's worked hard for everything she's achieved." There it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. Mom knew. She'd been part of this from the beginning. "Complications," I repeated. "Is that what you call identity theft and fraud now?" Mom's sharp intake of breath confirmed what I'd already suspected. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that I do know. And I'm not coming home until this family stops lying to each other and to everyone else." I hung up before she could respond and immediately called Jake. "I need to talk to your mom," I said when he answered. about the bank accounts. An hour later, I was sitting in Mrs. Patterson's office at Desert Financial Credit Union, the folder of evidence spread across her desk. Jake had explained the situation to her, and she'd agreed to meet with me unofficially to review what I'd found. "This is very serious, Savannah," she said after examining the documents. "These account statements are definitely from our institution, but they've been altered. The balances, the transaction histories. None of this matches our actual records. So the statements are fake, digitally manipulated. Someone with decent computer skills could do this, but they'd need access to legitimate account information to make it look this convincing." She paused, studying one of the documents more closely. "This account number here, it belongs to an account that was closed 3 years ago due to suspicious activity." My heart raced. What kind of suspicious activity? I can't give you specific details due to privacy regulations, but I can tell you that the account holder was flagged for potential identity theft. The case was referred to federal authorities. "Federal authorities like the FBI?" Mrs. Patterson nodded gravely. "Financial crimes like this cross state lines when they involve federal aid programs. If someone is using false identities to claim benefits or scholarships, it becomes a federal matter very quickly." I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Taking this information to the authorities would destroy my family completely. Dad would go to prison. Mom would probably face charges too. Melissa would lose her scholarships and her admission to Harvard. But staying silent meant letting them continue stealing from programs designed to help people who actually needed assistance. It meant letting Melissa take a spot at Harvard that should have gone to someone who'd actually overcome financial hardship. "What would happen if someone reported this?" I asked quietly. "The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit would investigate. If they found evidence of systematic fraud, especially involving federal aid programs, it could result in prison time, massive fines, and full restitution of any fraudulently obtained benefits." I gathered up the documents and thanked Mrs. Patterson for her time. As I walked back to Jake's car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging where you don't belong or you'll regret it." My blood ran cold. How did they know what I was doing? Had they somehow tracked my research at the library? Were they monitoring my phone? I showed the text to Jake when I got to his car. "Savannah, this is getting scary," he said, his face pale. "Maybe you should just report what you have and let the authorities handle it." "But I don't have enough yet. I need proof that Melissa knows. I need evidence of exactly how much money they've stolen, and I need to know how many other people might be involved." "What do you mean, other people?" I thought about the sophisticated nature of the document alterations, the multiple false identities, the coordinated timeline of Dad's supposed job loss coinciding with Melissa's high school applications. "Jake, there's no way Dad is doing this alone. Creating false identities, manipulating bank documents, coordinating unemployment claims across multiple states. This takes resources and expertise he doesn't have." As we sat in the parking lot of Desert Financial, I realized that exposing my father's crimes might be just the beginning. If there was a larger network involved, if other families were running similar scams, then what I discovered could be the tip of a much larger iceberg. But first, I needed to find out how deep my own family's corruption went. And I needed to do it before they figured out how close I was to uncovering the whole truth. Looking at that threatening text message one more time, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to run away or stay quiet to protect people who'd been lying to me my entire life. I was going to burn their whole operation down. The threatening text message was my first clue that I was being watched, but I refused to back down. Instead, I decided to use their surveillance against them. If they were monitoring my phone, I'd give them something to worry about. I spent the next 3 days creating an elaborate fake trail. I researched lawyers specializing in financial crimes, visited the FBI field office in Phoenix just to walk through the lobby, and had loud phone conversations with Jake about meeting with federal investigators next week. All of it designed to make my family panic and potentially make mistakes. It worked better than I'd hoped. On Thursday evening, while staying at Jake's house, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Melissa's voice, but she sounded nothing like the confident golden child I'd grown up with. "Savannah, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Desert Ridge Mall food court 8 o'clock?" Something in her tone made me agree. When I arrived, I barely recognized my sister. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore no makeup, and her hands shook as she clutched a coffee cup. "I know you found the documents," she said without preamble. "I know you know about the accounts and the scholarships." "How long have you known?" I asked, sliding into the chair across from her. Tears started streaming down her face. "Since sophomore year. I found some papers in Dad's office when I was looking for tax documents for a school project. At first I thought it was a mistake or maybe something temporary while he looked for a new job. But you knew it wasn't." She nodded miserably. "By the time I realized what was really happening, I was already committed to 3 different scholarship programs based on our fake financial situation. Dad said it was too late to back out without raising suspicions." "So you just went along with it?" "What choice did I have?" Melissa's voice cracked. "He said if I tried to come clean, we'd all go to prison. That you'd lose any chance at college because our family would be destroyed. He convinced me I was protecting you by staying quiet." I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for the first time in years. She wasn't the spoiled princess I'd imagined. She was as much a victim of Dad's manipulation as I was just trapped in a different kind of cage. "Melissa, there's more. The unemployment benefits, the multiple identities, the fake tax returns. This isn't just about your scholarships. Dad's been running a massive fraud operation." Her face went white. "What do you mean?" I showed her copies of everything I'd discovered. With each document, she looked more horrified. When I finished, she was sobbing openly. "I thought it was just the college aid," she whispered. "I thought once I graduated and got a job, I could pay everything back somehow. I never knew about the unemployment fraud or the fake identities." Melissa listened to me carefully. "How much does Mom know?" "Everything," she said without hesitation. "She's the one who helped create the fake bank statements. She has accounting experience from before we were born. Dad comes up with the schemes, but Mom handles all the paperwork." The pieces finally clicked into place. Mom's mysterious errands, her nervous behavior whenever finances came up, her immediate understanding when I'd mentioned complications during our phone call. "There's something else," Melissa continued. "Dad's been meeting with someone every Thursday night for the past year. Someone who supposedly helps him manage our financial situation. I think there are other families involved." My heart raced. "Do you know who Mr. Richardson from down the street? His daughter got into MIT last year with a full scholarship, even though he owns 3 car dealerships. And Mrs. Kim, whose son somehow qualified for need-based aid at Stanford despite their family taking European vacations every summer." A whole network. Multiple families in our wealthy neighborhood, all gaming the system together while their children took spots in aid money meant for students who actually needed help. "Melissa, I have to report this. You understand that, right?" She nodded, tears still streaming. "I've been hoping someone would because I don't have the courage to do it myself. I've been living with this guilt for 3 years, watching kids at school struggle to afford community college while I'm getting handed everything I don't deserve." "What about Harvard? Your scholarship?" "I'll lose it all. I'll probably face charges too." She looked directly at me for the first time since sitting down. "But you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm tired of living this lie. I'm tired of pretending I earned something I didn't. And I'm tired of watching Dad destroy our family to maintain his perfect image. Will you help me gather evidence? Will you testify about what you know?" Melissa wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. For the first time, she looked like the strong, capable person I'd always thought she was. "Yes, I'll help you take them down. All of them." Over the next 2 hours, Melissa provided details that painted an even more disturbing picture. The fraud network included at least 6 families in our neighborhood, coordinated by someone with connections at multiple universities. They'd been sharing strategies, forged documents, and even rotating which family claimed which type of financial hardship to avoid patterns that might trigger investigations. The most sickening detail was that they'd kept detailed spreadsheets tracking how much money each family had stolen through various programs. The total amount was over $2 million across 5 years. "There's a meeting tomorrow night," Melissa said as we prepared to leave. "All the families involved. Dad thinks I don't know about it, but I overheard him talking to Mom. They're panicking because someone's been asking questions about financial aid fraud in our neighborhood." "Someone's been asking questions? You, Savannah. Your visit to the credit union got back to them somehow. They're scared that their whole operation is about to be exposed." As I drove back to Jake's house, I realized tomorrow night would be my chance to catch them all together, planning their next moves or possibly trying to destroy evidence. If I could record that meeting, I'd have everything I needed to bring down the entire network. But I also realized that walking into a meeting of desperate criminals who'd already threatened me once was probably the most dangerous thing I could do. Still, as I thought about all the deserving students who'd been denied opportunities because of these families' greed, I knew I had to take the risk. Justice demanded it. Friday evening, I sat in my car across from the Richardsons' house, a high-quality audio recorder Jake had borrowed from his school's journalism program hidden in my jacket pocket. Melissa had texted me the meeting details earlier that day, along with a message that made my blood boil. "Dad told me to act normal and not contact you. He thinks I'm doing homework in my room." Through the Richardsons' large front window, I could see at least 8 adults gathered in their living room. My parents, the Richardsons, the Kims, and 3 other couples I recognized from neighborhood events. They looked like any normal suburban social gathering except for the stacks of papers on the coffee table and the tension visible in their body language, even from across the street. I waited until everyone had arrived before making my move. The Richardsons' house had a side gate that led to their backyard, and I knew from birthday parties over the years that their living room had French doors opening onto their patio. If I could get close enough to those doors without being seen, I might be able to record the entire meeting. The gate was unlocked, and the backyard was dark except for the light spilling from the living room. I crept along the side of the house, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. When I reached the French doors, I crouched behind a large planter and activated the recorder. "Can't afford to have anyone looking too closely at the applications now," my father was saying. "Savannah's already been to the credit union asking questions. If she files a formal complaint with the Department of Education, we're all finished." "Maybe it's time to cut our losses," said a voice I recognized as Mr. Kim. "We've all gotten what we needed. Our kids are set for college. We've made enough money to be comfortable. Why not just shut everything down?" "Because said a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "Shutting down now means we can't help the younger kids. My daughter's only a sophomore. She needs 2 more years of documented financial hardship to qualify for the programs we've identified." Mrs. Richardson spoke up. "The bigger problem is what Savannah already knows. She's clearly seen documents, and she's smart enough to piece things together. David, what exactly did she have access to?" My father's voice turned cold. "She broke into Melissa's room and found the financial aid applications, but I've handled it. Melissa doesn't know anything beyond the basic scholarship situation, and I've made it clear to Savannah that pursuing this would destroy her sister's future." "That might not be enough," said another male voice. If she's already talking to bank officials, she might go to the FBI next. We need to consider more direct action. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. More direct action. What did that mean? No, my mother said firmly, and I was surprised to hear genuine distress in her voice. I won't be part of anything that could hurt Savannah. She's still my daughter. Carmen, be realistic, my father snapped. If Savannah exposes us, we all go to prison. Your daughter included, since she's been part of the scholarship fraud for 3 years. Melissa's been part of it. Mrs. Kim sounded shocked. I thought you said the kids didn't know anything. Most of them don't, my father replied. But Melissa figured it out early and agreed to keep quiet to protect the family. Now she's as complicit as any of us. I felt sick hearing him throw Melissa under the bus so casually, especially knowing she was upstairs in her room, probably dying of guilt and anxiety. Look, said the unknown woman's voice, we have contingency plans for a reason. The offshore accounts, the document destruction protocol, the alternative identities we've been developing. If we implement everything now, we can be out of the country within 72 hours. My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to destroy evidence. They were planning to flee the country entirely. What about the kids? Mr. Richardson asked. We can't exactly take them out of school and disappear without raising suspicions. The kids stay, my father said matter-of-factly. Clean break. They're all legal adults or close to it. They can claim they had no knowledge of our activities. You're talking about abandoning our children, Mrs. Kim said, her voice rising. I'm talking about making sure they don't go to prison with us, my father replied. Better to have them hate us and be free than have them visit us behind bars. I'd heard enough. These people weren't just criminals. They were planning to destroy their families and abandon their children to save themselves. I started to back away from the door, planning to call the FBI immediately when my foot caught the edge of a ceramic pot. The crash seemed deafeningly loud in the quiet night. Inside the house, all conversation stopped. What was that? Someone said. I heard footsteps moving toward the French doors and realized I had seconds before they discovered me. I ran for the gate, but it was too late. The patio light blazed on just as I reached the corner of the house. There! Someone's running! Mr. Richardson's voice shouted behind me. I made it to my car and started the engine just as several figures emerged from the front door. In my rearview mirror, I saw my father's face clearly illuminated by the streetlight, his expression murderous. My phone rang before I'd even made it to the end of the street. Dad's number. You have no idea what you've done, he said when I answered. His voice was eerily calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been screaming. You think you're some kind of hero, but you've just destroyed multiple families? I've exposed criminals, I replied, my voice shaking but determined. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a vindictive little girl who's willing to send her own sister to prison because Mommy and Daddy didn't buy her a car. This isn't about the car, and you know it. Come home, Savannah. We can work this out as a family. But if you take that recording to the authorities, I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I hung up and immediately called the FBI tip line. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. But as I gave the federal agent my information and explained what I discovered, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Dad had made a crucial mistake in that phone call. He'd admitted there was a recording worth worrying about, which meant he'd just confessed to the very crimes I was reporting. The FBI moved faster than I'd expected. Within 48 hours of my call, federal agents were executing search warrants at all 6 houses involved in the fraud network. I watched from Jake's living room window as they carried boxes of evidence out of my family's home, my parents following behind them in handcuffs. The local news coverage was extensive. Wealthy Phoenix neighborhood fraud ring exposed dominated headlines for weeks. The details that emerged during the investigation were even more damaging than what I'd uncovered. The network had stolen over $3 million from federal aid programs over 6 years, affecting not just college scholarships, but unemployment benefits, food assistance programs, and even disaster relief funds they'd claimed after fabricating property damage from storms. Melissa was granted immunity in exchange for her full cooperation with federal investigators. Her testimony revealed the psychological manipulation tactics my father had used to convince the family's children to participate or stay silent. Several other siblings came forward with their own stories of being threatened, bribed, or guilted into compliance. The trial lasted 4 months. I testified for 3 days describing my discovery of the documents and the recorded meeting where they discussed fleeing the country. The defense attorneys tried to paint me as a vengeful daughter seeking attention, but the evidence was overwhelming. My father received 8 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. My mother got 5 years for her role in creating false documents. The Richardson and Kim families received similar sentences, while the newer members of the network got lighter punishments in exchange for cooperation. The most satisfying moment came when the judge read the restitution orders. Every family had to pay back everything they'd stolen, plus penalties and interest. My father's precious reputation as a successful financial advisor was destroyed completely, and his professional licenses were permanently revoked. But the real victory came 6 months after the trial ended, when I received a letter from Maria Santos, a student at Arizona State University. She wrote to thank me because her financial aid appeal had been approved after the fraud was exposed, creating openings for students who actually qualified for need-based assistance. She was the first of dozens of letters I received from young people whose lives had been changed by having access to the aid that had been stolen from them. Melissa and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. She'd lost her Harvard scholarship, obviously, but she enrolled at Arizona State with honest financial aid based on our family's actual destroyed finances. She changed her major from pre-law to social work, saying she wanted to help families who were actually struggling instead of pretending to be one. I know I can never undo the damage I caused by staying quiet, she told me over coffee one afternoon. But maybe I can spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. The house was foreclosed on within 6 months of my parents' conviction. Everything was sold to pay restitution to the federal programs they'd defrauded. Melissa moved in with our aunt in Tucson while I stayed with Jake's family until I could afford my own place. Working full-time at a nonprofit organization that helped first-generation college students navigate financial aid, I finally enrolled in community college 18 months after that awful morning when I'd asked about Melissa's car. My grades were excellent, partially because I was paying my own way and understood the value of every credit hour. The strangest part of the whole experience was discovering that several neighbors had suspected something was wrong for years. Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door, told me she'd always wondered how families in our neighborhood kept qualifying for need-based aid while driving luxury cars and taking expensive vacations. "But you don't want to accuse people of something like that without proof," she said. "I'm glad you had the courage to dig deeper when something didn't feel right." 2 years after the trial, I received a letter from my father in federal prison. He'd written to tell me that his actions had been motivated by love for his family and desire to provide the best opportunities for his children. He claimed he'd never intended to hurt anyone and hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive him. I threw the letter away without finishing it. Some wounds don't heal just because someone decides they want forgiveness. But I did visit my mother once about a year into her sentence. She looked smaller in her prison uniform, older and more fragile than I remembered. She cried when she saw me and apologized repeatedly for everything that had happened. "I know you probably hate me," she said, "but I want you to know that every day in here I think about how proud I am of you for doing the right thing, even when it cost you everything. You chose truth over comfort. I realized that while I couldn't forgive her yet, I didn't hate her either. She'd made terrible choices, but she'd also been caught up in my father's manipulations just like the rest of us. The most unexpected consequence of everything was the scholarship I received in my junior year of college. The organization that awarded it specifically sought out students who demonstrated moral courage in difficult circumstances. The application required an essay about a time I'd stood up for what was right despite personal cost. Writing about my experience forced me to really think about what I'd learned. Yes, my father had been a criminal who'd hurt countless people through his fraud. But more than that, he'd created a family dynamic where love was conditional on silence and compliance, where asking questions was treated as betrayal and seeking truth was punished with exile. Breaking that cycle had cost me my family, my home, and my naive faith that parents always know best. But it had given me something more valuable, the knowledge that I could trust my own judgment and the strength to act on my convictions, even when the stakes were terrifyingly high. Now, as I prepare to transfer to a 4-year university next fall to study criminal justice, I think about all the young people who are sitting in situations similar to what mine was. Kids who sense something isn't right but are afraid to ask questions. Siblings watching others get preferential treatment while being told they're imagining things. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever been in a situation where your family's version of events didn't match what you were seeing with your own eyes? Have you ever been punished for asking legitimate questions about fairness or honesty? Drop a comment and share your story. You might be surprised how many people have experienced something similar. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama justice and finding the courage to speak truth to power. Share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right is worth it, even when it's scary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their worst behavior. Truth might hurt in the moment, but lies destroy everything eventually.